Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. Today, we are talking Sega Genesis, specifically my top 10 of all time. Your list will no doubt be different than mine, but I do want to hear it. Leave it in the comments below. And later on, Sega came out with the G.I. Joe based on the Let's get to it, guys. My top 10 Sega Genesis games of all time. Alien Storm was a co-op beat-em-up that came out in the arcades in 1990. I never did have a local arcade that really had one, so I didn't really know about this game until it came out for the Sega Genesis. Never owned it, but I did rent it, and oh my god, did I fall in love with this game. It really did take the best of Golden Axe and other games like that at the time. Played very similar to Golden Axe. Then you had these cool little bonus stages like this where it was almost first-person shooter-ish. Bosses were great. If I have one complaint, it's the hit detection. I don't think is as good as Golden Axe. But, I mean, look at this run and gun stage here, guys. We got the best of Terminator. We got the best of Alien, all kind of mixed into one beautiful package. The graphics too are so great in this game. Sound effects, classic Genesis style. I can't recommend this game enough, guys. If you haven't tried it, you need to today. Batman by Sunsoft for the Sega Genesis. Oh my god. I can't tell you how much I love this game, guys. Are there better Batmans? There probably are. Batman and Robin on Genesis. Batman by Sunsoft for the NES is a bit more quicker paced. But I remember seeing the screenshots for this in Electronic Gaming Monthly, especially when Batman was dropping down from the sky to enter the first level, and just how incredible it looked. First of all, it looked exactly like the Tim Burton movie. So Batman was all dressed up in black. The graphics, of course, were 16-bit. The sprites were bigger. Your character models were bigger as well. I knew a couple friends around the neighborhood who had this game, but I wasn't lucky enough at the time to have this game. I do have it in my possession now, and it's honestly an honor. There's a lot of nostalgia that is tied to this game, like I said. I do believe overall that the NES Batman by Sunsoft is better, but this game will always hold a special place in my heart. It's just a great reminder of how incredible the Sega Genesis was and how amazing that time in video game history was. Oh yes, Shadow Dancer. Probably not the most popular of the Shinobi games, but that doesn't matter for me. There's one huge thing that makes this Shinobi shine above all the rest. Can you guys guess? There it is right there. The Timberwolf that you have. Of course, it reminds me of Snake Eyes. I have a huge love for 80s ninjas and all that, all the great movies that we got back in the day. The Shogazuki, Revenge of the Ninja, Enter the Ninja, Ninja 3 The Domination, all that stuff. And of course, my favorite toy line of all time is G.I. Joe. You gotta love Snake Eyes and Timber. Revenge of Shinobi, I think overall for the Genesis is, once again, probably a better game. There's a lot more to it. This falls kind of like in the same category as the very first Shinobi, the arcade game did. But just for me, Shadow Dancer always graphically was so impressive. Now that's not to say it doesn't have its shortcomings. I mean, the one-hit kill is kind of annoying. But overall, I would say the magic abilities and the abilities you get for Shinobi just trump that completely. You guys need to check out Shadow Dancer. I'll always remember the opening to Joe Montana Football. Joe just coming on the screen looked larger than life. The graphics looked exactly like him. He's just like, welcome to Joe Montana Football. This game got me into liking the NFL back in the day. And of course, Joe Montana and the San Francisco 49ers were my favorite team. This game was basically a stripped down version of football, simple to the point. I loved it. I still like playing this game today. It kind of went in a different direction with the sequels, with the sports talk and the side view. Didn't like that as much. The original will always be the best. Long before Sonic was the mascot for Sega, they had a little-known character named Alex Kidd, who I was drawn to. More importantly, I have a very nostalgic connection to Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. My mom and I would always rent this cottage, and I would always take a couple of my friends up with me. One particular year, we stopped and bought a couple of video games. We picked up Chippendales Rescue Rangers for the NES by Capcom, and this gem here, Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. I just remember playing those two games over and over again through that whole week, bringing up a stack of Game Pro and Electronic Gaming Monthly magazines. The beach, I tell you guys, it was pure heaven. Alex Kidd had a really interesting way of defeating bosses. He played paper, rock, scissors against them. So you basically have a 1 in 3 chance to defeat each boss. A little frustrating, but nonetheless extremely fun. Ghostbusters for the Sega Genesis was made by Sega, and probably one of the most sought-after games I can remember for us in high school. For whatever reason, this game was not readily available. I don't know if it just kept selling out at our local game stores, but I remember you could hardly even find it to rent. You definitely couldn't find it to buy. Luckily, one of my very best friends secured a copy, and when we would do our weekend video game trades, this was often number one on my list. Did you guys do that with your friends? Did you exchange games? For us, it was a lot of fun. Of course, there was a lot of trust involved, for sure, but it was a great way for you to kind of try and expand your knowledge in video games without having to go out renting or buying everything in sight. But this was one I picked up later on in life. Again, it's still pretty pricey, especially with the box and the manual. If you're trying to get it complete, Ghostbusters for Genesis has always been rare and valuable. I just found, as much as I loved Ghostbusters, that the games that came before it, there was one on the Master System, there was one on the NES, they just didn't do it for me. They weren't honestly that great. This one was a side scroller, and the characters looked wonderful. They're very cartoony. They have bobbleheads. I'm not too sure why Winston is not in the game. That's kind of strange. But I mean, look at Peter here. The graphics are fantastic. You could choose wherever you want to go. You can go to any level at any time. Buy weapon upgrades, buy equipment upgrades. There's just so much to it. Ghostbusters rocks. This one, I'm sure, is on most people's lists. It's friggin' Golden Axe, ladies and gentlemen. One of the greatest co-op games on the system and of the 16-bit generation in general. This game looks so close to the arcade, it's scary. You have beautiful, bright colors. The characters are gigantic, and it's really fun, honestly, to go through it multiple times with the different characters. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses. You can ride the mounts. You can, kick the bad guy off their mount and take it for yourself. The game is challenging without being overly ridiculous. I mean, you can kind of go through Golden Axe in maybe under an hour, which I think is pretty awesome. There was a couple sequels, but in my humble opinion, I don't think any of them hold up to this original one here. And again, you'll find this on a lot of people's top 10 lists. In fact, you'll find Golden Axe for the Genesis on most greatest games of all time lists. It's just that damn good. During the 16-bit Genesis era, Sega was really great at taking their arcade ports and putting it over to the Genesis, which seemed to be at the time flawless. Of course, now we look back and they're not, but at the time, they were way closer than the NES, way closer than the TurboGrafx in terms of converting arcade games. And while the NES was still going very, very strong in the late 80s and early 90s, it was very apparent to everybody that the future was 16-bit, and Sega most definitely was leading the way. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave this Game of the Year in 1989. Ghouls and Ghosts came out at a time when I did not own a Genesis. I had a TurboGrafx and a Nintendo. My aunt, however, did. I spent many, many weekends there playing all sorts of amazing Genesis games I never experienced before. This, of course, was one of them. Ghouls and Ghosts by Capcom, a beloved sequel to Ghosts and Goblins. A game that is known for its notorious difficulty for sure. But again, there's a reason this got Game of the Year. The graphics are absolutely gorgeous. The soundtrack is iconic and gets stuck into your head for days, believe me. Arthur, one of my favorite video game characters of all time. What's not to love? Bunch of different weapons you can grab. Some good, some pretty not so great. But all interesting nonetheless. The bosses are gigantic. Check out this guy here. I can't remember this guy's name, but check him out. Seeing this boss in the pages of EGM, it lit me up. I was like, wow, arcades are coming home. This is the future of video games. The sign of a great game, one you can pull off the shelf a decade later, 2 decades later, 3 decades later, and it still just makes your face light up. Ghouls and Ghosts for the Sega Genesis is just an all-time classic. Phantasy Star 2 flat out is my favorite role-playing game of all time. I always found the world of Phantasy Star so interesting, and this game was obviously compared very heavily to Final Fantasy on the NES when it came out. And while obviously Final Fantasy is legendary, I would say that Phantasy Star is right up there as well, especially number 2. This game is incredible. It did everything the first one did, it just did it a lot better and with a more grander scale. Of course, you have the Genesis, so you have hardware that can handle that kind of thing. This game is not for the faint of heart. It is tough as nails. When you start out, you're going to have to grind a ton to get anywhere, or you're going to die over and over and over again. Beating a boss in this game, getting a new piece of equipment, or a new party member feels like such a huge achievement. I really wish Sega would go back to the drawing board. I know they made Phantasy Star Online, which was great in its own way, but I really would like to see another single-player Phantasy Star game again. We haven't had one since 4 on the Genesis. Sega, can you hear me? Just watch this part right here. Strider flying in with the glider. This image was burned in my brain again. The pages of the beloved video game magazines I used to read showed this very level. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This game was huge. The characters were gigantic. At the time, I didn't know Strider was an arcade game. So the fact that this game was being created for the Genesis blew my mind. I mean, Strider was already a pretty cool character, one I knew from the NES game, but this was like on another different level. Strider came out at $99 in Canada, which was unheard of, but it had a whopping 6 meg of power. I did get this game for Christmas, and still to this day, it's one of the most amazing, incredible Christmas memories that I have. Strider has 5 levels, I believe, and I remember going through it, getting past the second level, getting past the third level, creeping into the fourth, and as I would get to the end of the fourth level, I would literally stop playing, pause it, put the controller down, shut off the Genesis because I didn't want the experience to end. There was nothing like Strider at the time. There just wasn't, and there's been a couple of sequels for Strider, a couple arcade games. Strider himself has appeared in many Capcom games. I want to see another one. I want to see another side-scroller Strider like this one. I do actually want to talk about Phantasy Star again for a quick second too, because that was a game that was also very expensive. That one was $129 when it came out, and it came with its own strategy guide. The top games on Genesis were very, very expensive. Strider is worth every single penny, and I played through it again as I was recording this video, and it was just as fun as it was back in 1990. There is one thing we can all make fun of and agree on, I think, is that the North American box art for Strider is absolutely hideous. What were they thinking? I don't know, but it looks nothing like the character whatsoever, and it's actually kind of funny. Look at this boss fight. How amazing is this game? Strider for the Sega Genesis is my all-time #1 favorite Genesis game. Well, there you have it, my list complete, one of the greatest video game consoles in history. But I want to know your Sega Genesis memories. Let me know in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed the video and you love the Sega Genesis, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks, my friends, for watching, and until next time, I forgot Altered Beast.